Hi and welcome to a deep dive into a specific tournament, TopDeck Invitational 2025, where the top 4 were all Tymna Kraum. So yeah, this video is gonna be heavily focused on that commander pair. So out of 65 players, 19 were Tymna Kraum commanders, so to say, where the rest was a big variety. Some Sisay, some Kinnan, some Magda, Rogsai, some TNT, Tymna and Dargo, Narset, Marnius, Rocco. I mean, a big variety of things, but still, in the top 4, all Tymna Kraum. But how good did the commander pair perform in general when not only looking at the top 4, but looking at all 19 individually? So here you see a long list of how many wins, how many losses, and how many draws. And you can see the long list, and I basically calculated the numbers together. And if we average that by following this calculation where we combine the loss and draw into one value and divide that by the win rate, by the amount of wins, we get a win rate of 25.21%, which is actually lower than Tymna Kraum's average win rate in general. So that 1,749, that's how many tournament entries Tymna Kraum have gone into. Those 19 from that specific tournament are added to that total count. But Tymna Kraum's average win rate is at 26.68, which means that this tournament was a net negative for that commander pair. However, that's not the full truth, because we have to take a look at this entire compilation of all the various commanders too. And I did this and I calculated the average win rate and the average draw rate. Doing the exact same kind of calculation, we're finding a total win rate of 14.94, which means that all the 65 tournament entry games basically achieved a average value of 14.95, like 15% win rate. Very low. And the reason is actually quite simple. Average draw rate inside the entire tournament was around 44.47. Here we have total decks 59. Now, the tournament actually had 65 tournament entries, but I couldn't find deck lists for all the various commanders. So the amount of deck lists that I could find was 59. And that is why the average win rate up there is 15.53 when I calculated all the 65 instead of the 59, I found it to be 14, the value that I just recently saw. But a big takeaway from that tournament was that a lot of games went to draw, like a lot of games, which is the big reason why you have a very low win rate outcome. Like in a 4v4, or yeah, in a 4-pod game, you normally have like an average win rate of 25. But because draws happens, no one wins, the win rate goes down. Now I've been collecting and calculating data on various tournaments, and I've noticed a trend that the draw rate is going up. People are going to draw a lot more compared to before, which is going to, in my opinion, potentially drag down the win rate on all various commanders over time. So you kind of have to reevaluate how strong certain commanders are. Like you can't really look at the past and say, it used to have this high win rate, now it's going down. I think all commanders' win rate is going to go down, because I think there's a culture trend that people don't mind going to draws in tournament. Let's continue and take a look at the winning deck list by Zachary Adler. So he's playing 17 creatures, Tatarotaro is here, Professional Facebreaker, and Mayhem Devil. That's not something you usually see, as well as Fairy Mastermind. We also have Lofo and Delny Streetwise Lookout. Delny actually synergized with a lot of creatures here, so first and foremost she synergized with Tymna, but then Tatarotaro, Orcish Bowmaster, Esper Sentinel, Ragavan Mastermind, Lofo, Professional Facebreaker. She does not synergize with Valley Floodcaller. It is going to synergize once, because once that +1/+1 happens, it's no longer to like consider an option as the power goes too high. 8 sorceries, the common ones you always see. 29 instants, Adnos being one of them. 12 artifacts. He doesn't play the One Ring. Now he is playing Grinding Station. Normally you don't play Grinding Station when you have access to blue because you already have a Brain Freeze. But I've actually looked at the data, and decks that can include Brain Freeze but choose to also include Grinding Station actually has a little bit higher win rate. Among enchantments, he's playing Necropotence, and then the usual ones including Smothering Tide, and 27 lands. And the beach is also in the top 4. His list is pretty similar, no Mayhem Devil, 16 creatures instead, and he's playing Knuckles. Double Strike, Trample, Haste. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. He's actually going to create 2 treasure tokens if he connects, because he has Double Strike. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 13 or more artifacts, you win the game. Not really going to happen, but he's like a secondary professional face breaker. Other than that, it's more or less the identical kind of list. We have an Adnos, we have a Grinding Station, Copy Artifact instead of Necropotence, and 27 lands. Then we have a Corwin Caster, Professional Facebreaker is still here, Lofo is still here, Opposition Agent is this time in this deck list, the same typical sorceries, and kind of the same typical instance, Adnos here too. This person does not play Grinding Station, while instead playing a lot more enchantments. He has Copy Artifact, Necropotence, Smothering Tide, and Copy Enchantment, and then 27 lands. Remember Copy Enchantment, we're gonna get back to that later. But first let's look at the last person in the top 4, Sterling Sellards. So he has 15 creatures, where Stormkiln Artist is suddenly appearing, no Mayhem Devil, Ledger Shredder, Professional Facebreaker, all 4 were playing Professional Facebreaker. Among the sorceries there is some difference, he's playing Demonic Console and Besiege the Mirror. Oh, Orim's Chant, you don't normally see that all the time. And Adnos as well. So all 4 top 4 Tymna Kraum were playing Ad Nauseam. And here we also have Gifts Ungiven. No Grinding Station and no the One Ring. So none of the top 4 were playing the One Ring. Here you only see the 4 core enchantments, or well, Smothering Tide might not be a core enchantment, but these 3 are. And then he's playing 27 lands. In other words, all the top 4 were playing exactly 27 lands. Now some of the other Tymna Kraum builds were playing somewhere around sometimes 26 and 28. We're not gonna go into all of them in detail, we're just gonna look at the top 4 here. But all top 4 were playing 27 lands. Now let's look at some of those cards that Tymna Kraum among those top 4 played that stood out a little bit, like Mayhem Devil and that Demonic Consul and Copy Enchantment, and some other. So this is not from only that individual tournament, this is from all Tymna Kraum decks that have ever entered into a tournament, 1772, where Adnos is heavily played and is showing some success. But how about that Copy Enchantment? Well, it looks like it's doing good, and I can see why. You can copy someone's Rhystic Study, Smothering Tide, or well, Carpet of Flowers is okay, but Mystic Remora. You can also duplicate your own Rhystic Study if you won't like to have 2. And as you can see, the win rate is actually going up by plus 1.66 compared to the total average, where Copy Enchantment scores a 28.23 average win rate. So it looks like it's doing good for the Tymna Kraum players that do include it. However, I would like to pitch a better card, Steal Enchantment. Gain control of Enchanted Enchantment. So instead of like duplicating someone's Rhystic Study, you are removing their Rhystic Study while gaining it yourself. One negative part about this one compared to Copy Enchantment is that if there's no Rhystic Study in play, at least Copy Enchantment can become a copy of your Rhystic Study. But in the end, I think that stealing a Rhystic Study is better than like copying it. Another problem with this is that it's 2 blue pips instead of like just 2 colorless and 1 blue, which could make it a little bit tricky and annoying in a 4-color deck to actually cast this thing. But still, I would suggest playing this one instead. One of the top 4 actually played both, which could be a good middle ground. Mayhem Devil also appears to be doing good. It's not very popular, like among the 1772, only 45 have ever included Mayhem Devil in their build. But as you can see, they have been kinda successful with it. But it's a very low sample size, so it's hard to say if it's actually good. On the other hand, the amount of treasures that people are generating, and like wizards are printing a lot of more cards that are producing treasures, I can kinda see how Mayhem Devil is climbing back into the meta. This used to be very heavily played, and sometimes even the finisher in some builds. I'm going to say the same thing, but more an emphasis on that the low sample size means we can't really say anything. Knuckles is a very new card, and sure, it looks like it's doing really good for the Tymna Kraums, but the sample size is once again very low, so don't take any of this with a certainty. But it looks promising, it looks like something you could consider and experiment with. Professional Facebreaker is in a very high inclusion rate, 65% have basically played it, and it seems to be good for the win rate when you do. Tataru, a very new card, but as you can see, it actually has a very high sample size. Now sure, the inclusion rate is 6.4%, but the amount of cards that actually, decks that have been played it is 113, and it's showcasing a good positive outcome for the win rate by plus 3.22, which means that the average win rate when you have Tataru and Tymna Kraum together, you get a win rate of 29.84. Demonic Consul, the same thing. This time, however, you're increasing the win rate quite heavily, plus 6.56. And the inclusion rate is not that small. Now, this is a new card, so obviously you haven't had maybe a high amount of time to actually playtest it, and I can see that some people just haven't want to include it because they're kind of scared of that delirium part. However, from 107 tournament entries inside Tymna Kraum, it has achieved a 33.13 average win rate, which is really good. And I actually think this is a good card, because delirium is not that hard to actually achieve. Once again, this is an Underworld Breach deck, so you're going to fuel your graveyard like you are already more or less including Dragon's Rage Channeler, which is going to help you make sure this become a demonic tutor. And tutors are very key, because that's how we get to our one card combos being Underworld Breach or Ad Nauseam. Grinding Station doing great. Not heavily played, it actually has less games than some of the newer cards that actually showcased, because a lot of people are on the opinion that if you play Brain Freeze, you don't need Grinding Station, but sometimes just including both seems to be a good choice. One of the top 4 did play Stormkiln Artist, and it's showing a very good promise, but the sample size is very small, but it's something to test out and potentially play more, because the part where you're basically casting an instant sorcery, creating a treasure token, is really good. Fairy Mastermind had actually made a comeback, so in the old win rate, like 2 years ago, Fairy Mastermind was usually showing a negative win rate in red, and now it's suddenly showing a positive win rate in green. For the 719 Tymna Kraum builds that have included Fairy Mastermind, they have achieved a win rate plus 1.31, which indicates that this is a very good card and very recommended. I actually think that the reason for this is that it has become something of a finisher. I have seen players basically mill out all of their opponents and make sure they have some cards remaining in their library, and then used each player draws a card to kill all opponents. I've also seen people have their Orcish Bowmaster in play and then use Fairy Mastermind to trigger Orcish Bowmaster and interact with opponents as well. So maybe there are more synergies, maybe the meta has changed to make Fairy Mastermind work better compared to 2 years ago. I should also showcase this just because of the fun of it. Now the sample size is down to 17, so it's a very few amount of people that have actually included Emrakul inside their Tymna Kraum builds. But hey, there seems to be some potential here. Personally, I love it. It's really cool. I think it's an achievement, truly, when you win the game by stealing someone's turn. But this is not a certainty. I think having ad nos in the end is going to be stronger. If we have more games, if the sample size goes up, I think the win rate is definitely going to go down. But now, let's go back and look at in this 65 player tournament, or in this case, the 59. So this is not looking individually on Tymna Kraum, this is looking at the entire tournament, all commander decks, all 59, and taking a look at what cards performed good inside that tournament. First one out, we have Ad Nauseum. Now you're gonna say, why is that weak? I mean, Tymna Kraum had a very good win rate. Well, TNT, Tymna and Frasius also played Ad Nauseum, dragging down the win rate a little bit. But in comparison, the average win rate inside that tournament was 15.53, while this achieved a 19.19, an increase of plus 3.66 to the win rate. Verdict, Ad Nos seems great. Underworld Breach was heavily played. This is actually a good way to showcase a meta inside a specific tournament, because this is basically how many of the 59 decks that on percentage did include Underworld Breach in it. Or well, were on the color identity of red, I should say, because if you have color identity of red, you're going to include Underworld Breach. But we could also say this is how often or how high percentage you're going to run into someone that is trying to win with a Thassa's Oracle, or the percentage of how many people might put an Esper Sentinel into play, but also the percentage of how many people might put a Draenei Magistrate into play. So for example, if you would have had a deck that would have been very weak versus a Draenei Magistrate, let's say you're playing a commander-centric deck, or Etali. Yeah, Etali is a great example here. Let's say you're bringing Etali to this tournament and you're scared of Draenei Magistrate. Well, the answer is it's a rarity card. The chance of you running into someone playing Draenei Magistrate at this tournament is very low. So if you're going back to this tournament in the future, you might not be that you might not need to be that scared of specifically this. The same thing can be said about the Gilded Drake, that did not appear in this tournament that much. If you're scared of Culling Ritual, 5 decks had it in their deck list, so it was also a rarity card. This is interesting. Normally when I see the One Ring, it is usually performing really good, but in this tournament it didn't. By the way, none of the top 4 actually had the One Ring as you saw in their decklist. I actually can't answer why, or well, no, I can. I have actually looked at this data, yeah, I can. I have specifically looked at the One Ring quite a lot, and I've noticed that the win rate doesn't increase that much unless you're also including some of the key cards, that Voltaic Key, Darevi, Seedborn Muse, Manifold Key. That's when the One Ring really pops. Otherwise it's just like, sure, it's good, and sure, it's like in the okay range. And maybe people have just started to consider it to be something that isn't working for them, and maybe lean more towards more tutors for Ad Nauseum instead. And this actually hurts your Ad Nauseum. So I can see why Tymna Kraum is moving away from this artifact, potentially. Tymna was doing pretty good inside this tournament. Once again, this is Tymna Kraum and Tymna Frasius. Bolas Citadel was not popular inside this tournament, apparently. I've actually done some data looking at Bolas Citadel versus Ad Nauseum, and the clear verdict is that it is usually better to only play Ad Nauseum and not even play both. Gifts Ungiven had a positive outcome for the win rate, plus 2.8% increase from only 8 decks including it in their builds. Recently made a video about Gifts Ungiven in general, and here you see some more results for it. And that's it for this time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little dive into a specific tournament and a look into Tymna Kraum in general. Something we might do more in the future, as there are always requests for various tournament data statistics on various different commanders and deep dives into different potential pathways on how you could build and play the commander pair. And this tournament actually had a lot of variety to it. I mean, I even showcased that Emrakul seems to be winning when you have it inside your Bluefarm build, which is weird, but it seems to be working out. Or well, we need more data. I think a strong outcome and a takeaway from this video is that Tymna Kraum can be built in a lot of different variations of ways. The commander pair is just opening you up for so much color identity and card draw from the command zone that you can take it in a lot of different directions. While Ad Nauseam and Unruled Breach seems to be the more popular choice at the moment. Regardless, there's still a strong indication here from this tournament, and something I've said in a lot of videos, that Tymna Kraum seems to be the strongest commander pair inside the format. It is definitely most popular one, but according to the data that I've calculated, it definitely has the strongest, highest win rate too.